Why Procedamus? I remember the day after my ordination, the morning of my first Mass, vesting in the sacristy, putting on the amice, putting on the alb, the cincture, the maniple, the stole, the vestments. I remember the 10 years that I had been preparing for this moment. Aside from the emotions and the nerves, I was aware of what offering the holy sacrifice of the Mass means for myself and for all the faithful. But additionally, given the context of the current persecution of the traditional Catholic faith in the world and in the church. I grabbed my chalice, I grabbed my beretta, looked at the crucifix, bowed, and said, Procedamus in pacem, to which the altar servers replied, In nomine Christi, Amen. I put on my beretta, and we processed out to the altar to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, the Mass of the ages. Ascending the steps of the altar, I felt only gratitude to our Lord for having allowed me to be an instrument in preserving that which is true, good, and beautiful for future generations, for the ages to come. As long as I'm physically able, this Mass will continue to be offered. This spirit of determination, this spirit of perseverance, is that to which I would love to invite all of you to share. The first annual Procedamus Gala is organized to support the mission of the Oblates of St. Augustine and the old Roman Catholic See of Caer-Glow to preserve the traditional Latin Mass and the traditional Catholic faith for future generations. Procedamus.
Hello, good night. Good evening, Father. How are you doing?
Good night, Alberto. We're done.
Night. Good night. Nighty night. Nighty night. Nighty night. How are you, Father?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. This is a little more organic than usual because, as you know, Father, I got here to the studio very recently, so we really didn't even get a chance to catch up before we went live. And then before, we were like, okay, at what time are we scheduled? And I'm over here just trying to finish my work for the day and so on and so forth. And this reminds me, by the way, hello everybody. Hello everybody on the live stream. Remember, this is just a very informal. I made a mad dash during our introduction to go grab some water. I hadn't even gotten a chance to do that as I arrived to the studio. Very happy, very glad, and very honored that you all are joining us this Friday night, first Friday. Father, it reminded me of some past situations tonight. I'm all over the place. Or I'm not even finishing a single topic. But today, some stuff came up in the morning. So several of the group of people that I hang out with here, we were not able to make it to First Friday Mass. And so now, one of the priests agreed to sort of meet us to just do like a communion service because it's First Friday. We take very seriously First Friday, and it reminded me of a topic that you and I have talked about a lot, Father, and multiple topics actually. So one of those is that we have the grifters that have no really responsibilities whatsoever. So the grifters are out there talking about the faith, but not really they don't have any skin on the game, unlike someone like you does, Father. So anyway, so that sort of came to mind because they also don't. You have to pray. You have to pray, Father. You have your rule of life, your responsibilities. You have to pray. You have to offer Mass daily, and for example, on the All Souls Day, more than one Mass. The grifters, on the other hand, they don't have any of these responsibilities, and so they are able to just sort of make video after video after video after content after content after content without having any of the responsibilities of a religious. So anyway, that was just.
And you know what? To dovetail off of that too, because I was actually going to write an article on Substack. So Restless Heart Media is now on Substack, so you can go look, restlessheartmedia.substack.com. But I was going to write an article because I actually had a conversation with someone the other day about conditional confirmation. So this person was a traditionalist Catholic, got baptized and confirmed by a traditionalist bishop. So skizzy, outside the institutional church. And and she met somebody that is, a TLM going Catholic, but they're going to get married at a diocesan TLM church. And I was having a conversation with this person because they wanted her to get a conditional confirmation, even though she was confirmed by a traditionalist bishop. And so she was talking to me about it, and what they were saying is that the confirmation by the traditionalist bishop was technically invalid because the bishop doesn't have faculties. And so, I'm Googling, doing some research, all this kind of stuff. Like, why would that be? Because I've read, of course, the traditional theological textbooks, the 1917 Code of Canon Law, and
So
apparently,
just to recap really quick, Father, before you continue. So this person was confirmed by a traditionalist bishop, correct?
correct, a
Okay.
valid
And-
traditionalist bishop,
and they're
unquestionably
considering that
valid.
Okay, go on.
Yes, unquestionably valid. There are Novus Ordo bishops that have said that this bishop is a valid bishop, this traditionalist bishop. Okay, so they still want to conditionally, actually, not even conditionally. It wouldn't be conditional in this sense. It would be to actually confirm her. And so the question is, why would that be? So in the 1917 Code of Canon Law, it acknowledged any confirmation by any validly ordained bishop to be valid. But in the 1983 Code, which of course was promulgated after 1976, when Archbishop Lefebvre was starting to ordain illicit priests and all that kind of stuff, and soon therefore after consecrate bishops. In the 1983 Code, it restricted confirmations to faculties, somewhat like marriage is restricted to canonical form. So now in the 83 Code, confirmation is restricted to faculties. In other words, if you don't have faculties, if you're not an ordinary of a diocese, then you can't validly confirmed. And I was like, what? This 83 Code is literally, because I've seen documents like from the Archdiocese of Chicago claiming that the CMRI confirmations are all invalid because they have no faculties, from the bishops and all this kind of stuff. And so you look at those who are trying to compromise with the 1983 Code and saying, well, if this is true, it's true for everyone, even since 1988. So all those confirmations, therefore, from the 1883 Code would henceforth be invalid. So I just told this person, I was like, well, it's up to you whether you want to be a 1917 Catholic or a post-Vatican II 1983 Catholic. It's up to you. It's up to you.
So, Father, under this 83 Code, so would the under the 83 Code, would the SSPX confirmations be technically invalid?
That's a good question, because SSPX will argue that because they're so widely dispersed, they're able to cause enough confusion to where they could make an argument for supplied jurisdiction. But I think all the other skizzy bishops, being skizzy as themselves, whether it's CMRI, Sanborn, Old Roman, all this other kind of stuff, people are going for the traditional sacraments. People are going there precisely because of valid sacraments. And so, of course, with traditional Catholic theology, reading old textbooks, they see that a valid bishop can validly confirm. Simple as. No need for faculties or whatever to be an ordinary, whatever else. So this is what the old books say. So you could even appeal to the fact that this is what the church has taught up until 1983. Because if you're studying anything that was published by the church before 1983 regarding confirmations, you're going to see that it's completely valid. So I don't understand why one specific group would get the common error argument, and not everybody else, given that this is what the church has taught up till 1983.
Interesting. Play Tops 1, we see your question. We'll get to the questions once we got a couple of questions right there, so we don't just veer the topic, but we see your question. We'll answer that question. So that's very interesting, Father, and it's very fascinating. And that question that you asked, do you want to be a 1917 Catholic or a Novus Ordo Catholic?
1983 Catholic.
So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We're very, very honored that you're on tonight. Remember, you are telling us what you want us to talk about. Drop your questions or comments in the chat. We'll get to that eventually. But Father, one thing that's really, I don't know really if it's just me or if perhaps other people that are watching, that are with us here tonight, are feeling the same way. But I get the sense, and it's just a feeling. Okay, oh yes, it really is just a feeling, because objectively, really, what we have seen, nothing really has changed. But I get the feeling, Father, that under Dr. Prevost, things are accelerating. I don't know if it's real, or maybe it's just because we had a change in the apparent head of the, or in the head of the Novus Ordo Church, and then it seems that things are just changing. But it seems to me that things are accelerating. And one thing that blows my mind as well is that in the, like, all of those that are trying to make it seem like, okay, the licit media outlets, okay, the ones that are like Catholic journalists, so they just say what the Pope does or whatever.
Mhm.
I'm going in the comments, and it seems that a lot of people are waking up, like more people than even under the Francis pontificate. However, since a lot of the grifters and Trad Inc. and Licit Inc. and so on and so forth, since a lot of them are ignoring that, they're just going like, oh, pretty much everything's fine, then it may not feel as so. But if you go into any of the posts by the traditional, just Novus Ordo Catholic media, you will notice that a lot of people are waking up. So that's, but I don't know if it's just a feeling that I have, Father, or if you can share, not share, but if you can sort of, I agree with that feeling. What do you think?
I was thinking this morning, actually, waking up is nice. Waking up is nice. But I think anger is a unique emotion. It's a unique emotion because it has the power to convince us that having that emotion is somehow productive. When you're angry at somebody and you think, oh, I would do this if they did this situation, I would do that if that situation occurred. It can make you feel positive of yourself. Like, yes, I would have the courage. Anger transforming itself into courage. But when it comes to the media and people waking up, so to speak, I feel like all it does is ignite some sort of anger in people's hearts, their emotions. They say they would do this, they would do that. But then, as someone tweeted about the Diocese of Charlotte, literally all the lay people capitulated. All the lay people there capitulated. They took away all the Latin masses, and the lay people capitulated. And so my question is, okay, it's not enough to wake up. It's not enough to wake up. That's step one. It's like, okay, what do we do? What do we do? How do we build? I have on Restless Heart Media a story of how and why Father John Melnick discovered Our Lady of Good Hope in the Roman Catholic Church in the Old Romans, where he, working for the fraternity of St. Peter, ended up pointing me to, and Bishop Michael. But it was precisely because the fraternity of St. Peter knew that there was a demand for the traditional Latin Mass in the United States back in the early 2000s. But the USCCB said, no, there is not. And so the fraternity of St. Peter actually sent out its priests to go to look in newspapers and everything to find all these illicit masses, so that they could show the USCCB and show Rome that there is a demand. There is a demand. And so that's how he came across the Old Romans and Our Lady of Good Hope Catholic Church, was precisely because he was sent out on that mission. And so what do we do? When our masses are taken away, do we shy and just go Novus Ordo? Do we shy and just go Byzantine or whatever else? No, I mean, if the only thing that's going to get Latin masses back is illicit Latin masses, simple as. Many times throughout the 80s and 90s, whenever there was a illicit mass that opened up in a bishop's diocese, he would open up an indult mass across the street. Those that went to the illicit mass would cross over to the licit mass, forcing the illicit mass to close. And then after the illicit mass closed, the bishop would close the licit, the indult mass, and then people were left with nothing. So what do we do to build? We put our money where his mouth is. We support those who'd actually, will wake up every day. We wonder how we're going to eat, because literally, we're asking for donations for the Oblates of St. Augustine. We live off donations. If donations stop, we stop eating, and in one sense, we have to close. Our churches would have to close. No money to turn on the church lights. Okay, well, we first cut out daily mass, first cut out First Friday mass, First Saturday mass, because we don't have the money to turn on the AC, turn on the lights, whatever else, and things cripple. And then when they close your diocesan TLMs, your indult TLMs, you say, oh, poor us. No, I mean, we have the ability to foresee, and so we need to act on this.
I'm going to talk about that, Father, before we finally start getting into the questions. But what a lot of us don't realize is just really how much it costs to even keep the lights on and keep the AC on in a church. So, for example, and I'm going to talk about an example that really has nothing to do with churches in specific, but just about the cost of things that people don't even think that cost that much money. So, a few years ago, I used to work. I was very involved, pretty high up in a collegiate athletic department. And sometimes an argument that would happen was that some of the coaches wanted to hold practices at night because it's less
Mm-hmm.
hot. Well, the problem is that just to turn the lights on at the field so the team could practice was thousands of dollars. And we don't really think about this. So when you see your local high school stadium on a Friday night that the lights are on, just the lights being on are costing whomever's the district or whatever thousands of dollars to play those games at night. So similarly, when we come into the church, when it comes to the church and keeping a building that usually has pretty, Our Lady of Good Hope is not the biggest church in the world, Father, but it still has pretty high up, ceilings. It's
Mm-hmm.
relatively of a decent size. So just keeping the lights on costs money. And the problem becomes precisely what you mentioned, even when we talk about, illicit masses here or there. In my view, the group that starts to sort of organize this way has to be very solid, because the moment that the bishop opens up, as you mentioned, illicit traditional mass with modernist preaching and so on and so forth across the street, people are going to go there, and you will be left without funds.
Mm-hmm.
So that is quite interesting. Now, okay, let's get to the questions. Finally, thank you all so much for joining us. Really, really pleasure to spend Friday night here with you all. Play Tops 1, the question, serious question. Do you all have a falling out with the RTF guys? Haven't seen you all on the rundown in quite some time. So, Father, I know as a matter of fact that you were started focusing on Restless Heart Media. And so that's basically how people don't really, may not realize that really the rundown takes a lot. It's a long show. And then there's preparation time and so on and so forth. So we have been putting out a bit more content over here on Restless Heart Media. So that's originally how you stopped being on the rundown. And then as for me, I just have not been invited back on the rundown. So, that's it. But that's that
So
is
for a
how it
long
is.
time too, for me personally, um, with the whole unpops thing and all that kind of stuff, for me, and this is again how I've eventually formed my view of just podcasting in general, like just the weekly news cycle, was that there was never really any. Sometimes there were just weeks and weeks where there was really nothing edifying to say, nothing really of value to say. But in order to put on a show, we would have to just make things up. And especially when it comes with unpops, sometimes like I would reflect on my unpop and like, you know what? I really just kind of went for like the trigger effect, just to, rage bait sort of thing. Is this actually edifying? This is worth my time. And so that's actually where the idea of Restless Heart Media was born from. I was like, okay, just a YouTube channel where we just put out evergreen edifying content. Like, I know that's not what everybody, like, as I say, good news doesn't make money or whatever, just only bad news. So you see, on your local news channel, you see sirens and police officers, and there was a shooting here, there was a shooting there. That's the kind of news people want to listen to. So they want to hear the bad news, they want to hear the rage bait, they want to hear the latest statement by Vigano condemning so and so, they want to hear the latest, this and that. Okay, I get it. But the reality was, in terms of putting into my time, sure, it was great to in a sense grift off that, introduce the Oblates of St. Augustine through this, and all that kind of stuff. But more and more, again, when it comes to this crisis, I want to do something that builds. I want to do something that edifies. I want to do something that helps get people to heaven. And just talking on the news and just pointing out the things that are bad, to me, that was insufficient. That wasn't enough. That still left me empty. And so this is where we decided to do, a whole video series on the introduction for the devout life, because we wanted to, if people are going to listen to podcasts and not read books, okay, well, we'll meet them halfway, and we'll take the books and put it in podcast form, put it in commentary form, in a format that people are used to listening to, in terms of two people dialoguing over something. And instead of making the weekly news the subject matter for Restless Heart Media, let's take the actual classics, the spiritual classics, the writings of the saints, and we'll have commentary on that. That way you can take it and listen to it in the car on your way to work, whatever else. If you don't have time to read the book, you could at least listen to our commentaries, those sorts of things. And so it was really, just for me, it was getting away from the whole idea of just a weekly news cycle type of show. Now, of course, every time there's some sort of breaking news that you just got to comment on because it's it's kind of a major news. I think on Restless Heart Media we have a show that we did on the close, not the closing, but the replanning of Epiphany of Our Lord Parish here in the Diocese of St. Petersburg, because I mean, I'm here. I know a lot of kind of information about it, so we just did it. But so every now and then there's going to be something like that. But no, mostly I'm gonna have playlists. Like I have philosophy of Aristotle here, so I'm doing a class at Our Lady of Good Hope, class to help make our younger generations woke proof, so to speak, to give them the philosophical foundations, not only to understand our faith, but to understand ethics, morality, that it all plays into human happiness. So the ultimate goal philosophically, even in Aristotle, was happiness, human flourishing. So I want to prove them, help them get those, have those tools. And so I'm recording my lectures, posting them, here on Restless Heart Media. So I'm focusing more on that kind of stuff, and it takes time. I write out my whole lectures, all that kind of stuff. I post the lecture notes on Substack, so you have it on Substack. Like all that kind of stuff takes time, and I just don't have the time, the bandwidth, the motivation to pay attention to the news. Again, it's just all rage bait. So that's kind of why I was like, okay, I'm done.
I remember, Father, when the whole election situation was going on and everybody was saying, "Oh, Trump and Kamala or whatever," you told me, Father Martin told me, if Kamala wins, I'm going to write her a letter of where I'm at so that she can come get me.
I didn't get to write that letter.
So there we go. And I have a couple of additional comments regarding this specific topic, but I'll save them once we start for later, once we start getting through our list of questions here. All right. So play tops again. I'm glad y'all are covering John Sr.'s work. Will y'all be covering The Death of Christian Culture? Father, I have that. The Death of Christian Culture, I have it. I just have not ever read it all, which is kind of funny because we are doing a show on the Restoration, but I personally haven't read The Death of Christian Culture. So it's pretty funny. But that's a great suggestion. Any suggestions, drop them, because we are always thinking of what we can do, next.
Yeah, and I was kind of actually had in the back of my mind whenever I chose this book, because I knew The Death of Christian Culture was the prequel and the Restoration of Christian Culture was the sequel. But I always have in the back of my mind the intro that G.K. Chesterton wrote in Orthodoxy. So he first actually, I think it was a series of articles or whatever, but it was compiled into a book called Heretics. And the person who he was responding to back and forth through, the journals, all that kind of stuff, one of his critiques of Chesterton was that, okay, you told me what you don't believe, but you didn't tell me what you do believe. And Chesterton was like, you're right. And so that's how he wrote, one of the greatest books that we have in Christian literature is Orthodoxy. And so that's kind of where I wanted to start, is like, okay, what do we need to improve? Because I think a lot of us, through the saturation of articles online and all that kind of stuff, I think we're very well aware of all the issues. Like we all have different ideas, but we all know something is massively wrong. And so it's like, okay, well, let's start with the actual restoration. Let's start where, getting us in line and helping us kind of at least form some sort of picture. So again, when we started doing the last episode, I was like, maybe I might critique this a little bit, but it was written in the 1980s or whatever else. Things have, adapted a little. Times have changed just a little bit. Situations have changed. And so maybe it needs, just a little bit of an update, but nevertheless, it's a good foundation. It provides a good framework for us to begin a restoration. Nevertheless, like smash the TV, like here we are on Restless Heart Media, right? Smash the TV, smash your computer screens. Maybe not so much, but for sure, there needs to be like massive diligence and temperance in its use.
All right, next question from Diana Liz. So good to see you back here in the chat. We had a great time last week. What are your thoughts about women participating on social media? Some trats are 100% against it. So I'll start out on this one. My thoughts on women participating on social media is it really depends. Depends what it's used for. I don't think that social media is evil or it is good. It just really depends what you use it for. So do you use it like Lila Rose? So basically using it to promote feminism, or like Ali Beth Stuckley, or like Abby Johnson, Avoiding Babylon did a little bit of a segment regarding this? or do, like, for example, I know that my wife is on social media, and that sort of helps, a little bit, keeping an eye out for bad things out there that we need to be uh, aware that are going on in the culture, to protect the children, protect ourselves as well. So it really, to me, it depends on what it's used for. What do you think, Father?
Yeah, so I mean, if your wife is on Instagram or Pinterest looking up recipes so that she can make you a great dinner at home once you get home, I mean that's a good use of social media. It's a very good and practical use to learning information. In terms of actually engaging in certain topics, that's where you start to um, get yourself into trouble. Is engaging in certain topics. So of course, there's the whole anon culture where they'll say things in a way that they wouldn't say them if they were saying it to your face and they had their identities known. Like there's that issue with anons. Like I'm not against anons, but I'm against that use of it being anon. Um, and if your wife or a woman is engaging in topics that just make her anxious, make her worried, make her um, just foster her rash judgments and gossip and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, that's just a general bad use of social media. So that's kind of what it depends on. So yeah, if you're Lila Rose and you're just using it for clout and to build up your self-esteem and all that kind of stuff, that's not good. If you're using it to just gain popularity, all that kind of stuff, that's not good. I mean, there's good things to use it for and there's bad things to use it for. Again, it just depends on the use.
Want to remind everybody to acquire your tickets for the Procedamus 2026 Gala in Clearwater Beach, Florida. Buck Hall will be joining us as the Master of Ceremonies. Father Calvin Robinson will be joining us as a keynote speaker. Father, you will be there. Bishop Miko will be there. Yours truly, I will be there. Procedamus.com. Get your tickets now. In case you didn't know, yes, you can just go into Procedamus.com right now and get your tickets for the gala. You can. It's ready to go. Get your tickets, Procedamus.com. As I believe Play Tops over here mentioned. And you said, Father, what do we do? No one talks about action. Procedamus.com. And really, Father, one of the really nice things about Procedamus is that really it has at its core the interior life. It's not one of those drifting conferences. It really has at its core the interior life and the structures and the parallel, I suppose, institutions that are built around are really meant to foster the interior life. We want saints. The See of Caer-Glow, the old Roman Catholic See of Caer-Glow, is looking for people that want to be holy. And I was going to mention this a little bit later, but Father, I think that the people that we should want to be friends with are those that are actually concerned about things pertaining to the spiritual life. Oh, I missed First Friday communion. Oh, how can we do this? Oh, I want to go to Holy Mass daily. Those people are the ones that really we want at Procedamus Gala, because they will be the ones, because really none of these things, and we talked about this in our first episode on the restoration of Christian culture, but none of the Holy Mass should be at the center of everything. So if we are being friends with worldlings, then that's where we are going to end up. Amy Jan Elizabeth says, good evening, Father and Alberto. God bless you both. Thank you. Likewise. Amy also says, I'm wearing sackcloth after what Prevost just did. My heart is bleeding for Blessed Mother Mary. So yeah, pretty horrible thing. And they really, Father, they sounded very Protestant. They say now there's a difference between saying that, yes, all good things come from God, of course. But when a Catholic says it, it's different than when a Protestant says it. When a Protestant says it, it really means to exclude everything else, exclude the communion of saints, exclude Our Lady. But when Catholics say it, it's in a manner to be precise. And it doesn't seem to me that they necessarily did it to be precise, because they were saying, oh, these titles cause confusion, but isn't there confusion reigning? Isn't the modus operandi of the Novus Ordo confusion?
Yeah, exactly. That's their the Synodal Church. That's their doctrine, is confusion.
Playoffs one. Alberto played soccer, football. Wait, football. No, I'm not. I was never good at soccer. I when we would play with my friends, I would always be the goalkeeper because I have pretty good reflexes. So I was pretty decent at that.
That's your excuse.
Yeah, exactly.
We all know what kind of kid we all throw in the goal.
And, the problem is that, like, Father, playing like in a big field is really difficult. It's exhausting, like consistently running, and
Oh no.
that's why that's why the soccer players are very in really good shape. They're very skinny because I mean they're running like 10 kilometers just in one match. So, and anyway, I did play football in high school. Let's see. Amy again says, I'm not going to the local TLM. It was put on my heart that if the church also celebrates mainly Novus Ordo fake masses, it doesn't feel right. That's a great point. That's a really good point. What do you think, Father?
I mean, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Obviously, if that's the main culture there, if you're raising children, it's one thing. Um, there's a lot of factors to weigh in. If you're, also spiritually starving yourself, not having a interior life, set prayers, rhythm of prayer, all that kind of stuff, a rule of life, and you stop going to TLM because of these certain things, which have merit, have value, but you see your spiritual life deteriorating from it. I would tell you to not necessarily go back, but to reconsider your strategy. Have a good spiritual director, have a good priest that you can verbally talk to, so that he can quickly understand all of your circumstances and dilemmas in your situation, so that he can give you adequate advice. Just I don't know, just saying something briefly and being able to find out what you should do in your particular concrete situation may not be sufficient. There's other details that need to be considered. So that's what I would say. If you find yourself in that sort of situation, you need to find a priest that you trust, that you can talk to, and that can counsel you regarding these important matters. Because, yeah, no, it's not something light to consider. But at the same time, like if you have children who are growing to the faith and they grow up just not going to church, well, they're gonna eventually grow up to be an adult and say like, well, I grew up not going to church, so why is that important? So there's many factors to consider. Many factors to consider.
Good points. Good points. Diana Lee, so tired of the news. And then also maybe regarding suggestions for books, perhaps a book on mental prayer would be good. I think there's a Baroni's Press book, Difficulties on Mental Prayer, or something like that. That one is a pretty decent book. All right, we're back here. You touched on it that Senior famously said, smash the TV. He later says that if you love football, then turn the TV off and play football with your son. It's simple and basic, but profound. Yes, I do think that those are good points. What do you say, Father?
Yes, I think if you can't take it literally, it definitely there's a merit to it. Smash the TV, smash it. In other words, I mean, our Lord said something very simpler. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Now, did he really mean for you to cut off your right hand? No, that's mutilation. It's actually a sin, right? So, but there's that principle there. If something causes you to sin, it's better to go into heaven maimed than it is to spend eternity in hell. So when it comes to smash the TV, same principle as cut off your right hand. I'm thinking a lot about children. Like it's such a tool that a lot of parents use to, especially at restaurants, whenever they're trying to have some peace in conversation, to, hand your child your phone to watch, YouTube Kids or whatever else, some sort of show. Sure, it helps. I'm wondering what older generations did. At the same time, we can't know what older generations did if the older generations didn't teach us. Like we can read in books, but that's just one person's perspective. So there's a certain use for it, but to make them addicted to it, once you realize that their whole personality changes, that they're constantly asking for it, that sort of thing, there needs to be a certain limitation, because what John Senior actually said was also important. Like children need to develop imagination. And so when you constantly put certain cartoons in them, not only do they attach themselves, emotionally to their characters, just like when we watch movies or whatever else, there's some sort of emotional involvement in the actual storyline where you want something to happen as opposed to something else. And that's where the drama occurs. It's like, oh, what I don't want to happen seems to be happening, but okay, finally, they live together, happily forever after, or whatever else. So children do also have these emotional attachments to these characters, and so whatever moral formation these cartoon characters are giving to your children, they're going to start to imitate these values, these lessons that they're learning through cartoons. And so, and then of course being attached to virtual reality, which will be a lot worse as they get older. And you know what I mean, what I'm talking about. So you definitely want your children to learn to live in the real world first, and foremost, and primarily, and only use virtual reality as just a mere very limited pastime. I saw a meme today. It was just like a parent says, all of the kids today are attached to their iPads, and then it said me as a kid, and it showed one of the videos from like a Home Alone or whatever else of a like an 8-year-old lighting up a cigarette. I was like, what kids do today versus what kids did back in the day. It's like there's
there's something to that too with children. And today, Father, I saw somebody shared that Erica Kirk said that she has not told her children that their father passed.
That's crazy.
So apparently she comes out and says that she has just told them that he's in a road trip with Jesus or something like that. And it's really interesting to us here in our houses, and I'm sure that you all in the audience may relate to this, because we have, like, at least me personally, I have noticed that at least my children, and they're very young, pardon me, they don't seem to really struggle with the concept of death. So when family members have passed away, we've just essentially told them straight up. But at the same time, almost every time that we talk about the faith and we're involved in catechism and those things, the topic of death comes up, because the whole point of the faith, Father, is that we are going to die, and that the body will die, but that the soul never dies. The soul is eternal.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems interesting to me to not to now, of course, I understand that the topic of a father is much greater than a grandparent or great grandparent or something like that. But we as a culture, we are less concerned with sin than we are with death. So we should have a horror for sin and not really be as horrified of death, but it's the opposite. We are horrified of death, and we are pretty much perfectly fine with sin. So that's interesting. Father, this is a great question. Father, are you drinking iced tea?
It's called an old fashioned.
There we go. I'm drinking water. This is a cup of water. Linda, good evening, everyone. Blessings. Thank you. Within 2 paragraphs of Fernandez's document, he is capitulating to the approach by saying the document is about being ecumenical. Well, yes. Now, here's another topic, Father, and that is that in the Novus Ordo Church, people don't really notice, if I'm not mistaken, that the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith is now under the dicastery for evangelization, which is something that is very interesting, because the Novus Ordo Church, now when I say Novus Ordo Church and evangelization, they mean a different thing than Catholics do. So I don't want people to be saying that I think the Novus Ordo Church evangelizes. But in the Novus Ordo Church, they see evangelization more important than keeping the integrity of the faith. So this is also part of why we are seeing a lot of this subjecting the faith to whatever may be popular or the least controversial to the world. And the reality is that it's concerning to me, Father, because there's a lot of people that consider themselves Orthodox or conservative Catholics. I was talking with one of those yesterday, and I said, okay, so under that logic, under the Novus Ordo logic, Muslims can go to heaven, but Sedevacantists cannot. And he said, yes, that's pretty much correct. And I said, that's And the logic that they use for this, and I've seen it elsewhere, and this is the logic that they use. So Muslims don't know the faith, therefore we can claim invincible ignorance for them. Sedevacantists and trats in general, they really mean trats. Trats in general, they know the Novus Ordo Catholic faith, and they've rejected it. That's why they're going to hell. So
Well,
all of this.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. If we truly, if what I'm saying, and this is what I've argued too, if what I say I believe, if what I say I believe, is this traditional Catholic faith, which Massimo Fagioli says is no longer the Catholic faith, then did I really ever truly believe the Novus Ordo idea of the Catholic faith? In which case, how can I say that I knew the faith? Because they're two different faiths, they're two different religions. And here's where the idea of two different religions comes into play. They're the ones admitting it. They're the ones that even renounced. We added an adjective: traditional Catholic religion, traditional Catholic faith, traditional Latin Mass. They just decided to change their name. We're a synodal church now. Synodal church. Okay, fine. We'll adopt your name, synodal church. Before we were saying Vatican II, whatever else, even Vatican II Catholic, whatever. No, now it's just synodal. Now it's just synodal.
Absolutely. The etymology of restaurant is to restore. When I go to the restaurant with my family, I want to be able to enjoy conversation with my family, but all these restaurants have TVs now. This is a great point. We went to dinner for my wife's birthday this week, and we went to one of the more, not the most, but one of the more expensive restaurants in town. And I was very surprised that they actually, this was the first time that I had been to this place. I was surprised that they didn't really have TVs. Now, when it comes to, they had a big TV, but they were playing like landscapes, just basically rotating like drone or yeah, like aerial footage of like landscapes. That was really it. It was not very what's the word, like not very like engaging to the senses, really. We were just looking at some nice landscapes. They were playing music, but anyway. But when I wonder if a lot of the iPad generation of like little children having iPads, I wonder if that could also be part of, Father, the idea that usually it's important for families to live around or close to the support system for the woman. So to their siblings, to their parents and all that. But in such a globalized country that we live in, and how common it is for people to live outside of really where they're from. Well, for example, if my wife and I want to go to dinner really quick, we can leave the children with either one of our parents and then go to dinner and then just come right back and come home. Could be that now I understand that it's not, that this is not how it is for most people. It's insane how many families just have these devices really over at the table. But I wonder if that has also something to do to where you don't have a support system around. Oh, I think that was me. I think that was my arm. My bad, Father. I kept on pressing enter on the keyboard accidentally. But anyway, yeah, that is just a thought. And I suppose that now the other problem with most restaurants nowadays is that they are all like US foods restaurants. You get the same food at most restaurants.
Cisco food.
Yes.
One of the things I was going to say too is like, okay, at least all the TVs in the restaurants are at least showing things like sports games or news. So two masculine things. So that in one sense, that's a good thing. They're not showing like The View or anything that women would watch, or soap operas. At the same time, that's exactly what's going to distract a man from the conversation with the girl he's taking out on a date to the restaurant, right? And so it's like a double-edged sword. Sure, what's on the screens is something patriarchal, but it's precisely that which will distract man from what should be his focus at the dinner table, which should be conversation. So you're right.
Let's see, Edgardo Aragon. Is there any sources you recommend that talk about the devotional life in a busy family life and how to handle its challenges? So I before we answer this question, Edgardo, if you're still out there, if you could give us a few more details about what precisely you mean for a busy family life, because it may, Father, I think it may look different for many people. So if there's a a little bit more of what we mean by a busy family life, homeschooling, not homeschooling, and so on and so forth. That may be helpful. So Edgardo just put in a few more details, and maybe we can answer this question with a little more detail. Let's see. Real 48th Press on X. Come from Twitter. Didn't know you had a YouTube channel, Father Martin. What do you think about Leo XIV planning a meeting with the Cardinals this coming January?
It's a huge step that's different than Pope Francis in the sense that Pope Francis kind of never allowed the cardinals to ever meet. He never really had consistories or anything like that, except to make cardinals. So it was very few and far between, which was one of the problems when electing a new pope, is that the cardinals didn't know each other, and especially the one that was elected or was made a cardinal within like 1 or 2 years of him being made pope. So he was a cardinal for a relatively short amount of time. For people that know him, that's why you kind of know it was already pre-planned and everything behind the scenes. So in one sense, we just kind of have to see what comes from it. You don't really know what his plan or agenda is precisely for that particular event. I mean, he could say, "Hey, everybody, this is my agenda. You're getting online or else," or it could just be something plainly spiritual. Very vague, bland. Guys, we're here because we need to love God and lead the. If you said this, we need to lead souls to heaven, that would be like a huge shocker, right? For him, it's like, no, we need to build unity in this world. That would be more predictable. So we can just kind of have to, I think, wait and see about it to see if there's any more information that's uncovered about it. In one sense, we're far enough into his pontificate to kind of read his agenda, but we don't know 100% yet his modus operandi, and how he's going to use these events, because the Francis pontificate didn't exactly use these events. So it was something that was kind of sidelined, not used at all during the Francis pontificate, but now maybe Leo's going to use it again. But there's other things from the Francis pontificate that he is using, like the whole change attitude before changing doctrine. That's what Father Thomas Rees, the Jesuit who was at the head of National Catholic Register, basically says. So no, first you change the practice, then you change the doctrine. So that's what Amoris Laetitia did. First, we'll just start giving communion to adulterers, and then we'll change the doctrine about adultery, about divorce and remarriage. So first you change the practice, first you change the attitude, then you change the doctrine, which is why, grifters that go up there and say, wait, this doctrine on Mary Mediatrix and Mediatrix of all graces and the co-redemptrix, it didn't change anything. Well, no, duh. That's step 2. We're saying it's part of step 1, which is change the attitude, diminish devotion to Our Lady.
Absolutely. There we go. And then just a quick question here. Edgardo, I see you. Thank you so much for the little bit of a clarification. But question really quick. Is there an old Catholic rite church in New York City? So that would be Old Catholic is to be differentiated from Old Roman Catholic, but thank you for the question. And you responded here, this in the chat, not affiliated with the See of Caer-Glow. So if there is, I wouldn't recommend.
And also, it demands too what you mean by Old Catholic. If you mean like a traditional Latin Mass, I mean, the word old can mean anything. That's why on Twitter, my bio put traditionalist Roman Catholic, because that's a more adequate identifier. If you're looking for a TLM in New York City, I'm definitely sure there's like Institute of Christ the King, Fraternity of St. Peter, something like that around. If you're looking for a particular anything Caer-Glow, or I'm sure there's CMRI, some SSPX, something along those lines, where you can get something very solid. But in terms of some sort of Old Catholic thing, I don't know. I don't really work with Old Catholics, so.
I saw that. I've never been to New York City, so when I saw that, I think in the Diocese of Brooklyn they're establishing an institute parish, which they seem to keep getting a bunch of apostolates, but I don't even know how they're even manning those. But anyway, that's interesting. Okay, so getting back to Edgardo's question, so is there any sources you recommend that talk about the devotional life in a busy family? It's pretty funny, Edgardo, what you commented later. Breadwinner dad, stay-at-home wife, 2 kids, soon to be 3, not homeschooling yet, but planning to. It's basically me. I really, for the most part, could have written this exact same comment, except for...
It's all yours, Alberto.
So, I've tried a few of the resources that are out there. Let me I think one of those think one of the books is The Liturgical Life with the Children or something like that. I was sort of reading that, Father, and then I ran into a page that was talking about like a Seder meal or something like that. And so
Mhm.
then I immediately went like, well, this is kind of worthless. This is not really helpful at all. So now, Aragon, so I would imagine that you're Hispanic, which is wonderful news. This is just really the best thing that can happen to you, literally ever in the world. You're blessed.
This is the best English-speaking Hispanic podcast on ecclesiastical and religious matters you'll ever find.
Absolutely. So okay, so what I would recommend that you do is that you, if possible, if you have older relatives, whatever they may be, if like for example, if anybody in your family, grandparents or siblings or relatives of grandparents that are in their 70s or 80s or something like that, and you can have contact with them, and then just pick their brain a little bit and be like, hey, how was Christmas when you were a little kid? And then they'll start to remember a little bit, and just ask questions like this. So how was Christmas? How was just, you can start with very basic questions like that. Unless you came from a background of a family that was Protestant, which it's unlikely, you may get some very interesting responses from that. Oh yeah, like for example, for my family, one really interesting little piece of sort of devotional that I didn't pick up until later when I started learning about more traditional practices. So of course, the Novus Ordo, what happened in the Hispanic world is that the Novus Ordo got rid of a lot of the devotions, but people, just by custom, because it had always been done, just kept doing them. So in the future generations didn't really know why. And one of those examples for me is that I always heard growing up that one of my grandmothers would make a cod dish on the 24th. Apparently that was the most, like, everybody would always talk about how it was like religiously done the 24th, but nobody really knew why. Then when you start learning more about tradition, well, the 24th is a day of fasting and abstinence. So you're not, nowadays it's very common that the 24th, even in Hispanic families, people already gather to celebrate Christmas. So that's a very interesting little bit. So that's one thing that you could start with. So that would be getting in contact, if possible, with older relatives, and then just asking them questions like this. What usually happens is that they've that generation was gaslit so badly. So I remember with my grandmother who already passed away, I was having this sort of conversations, and she initially was saying no, like she was a very socially conservative woman, but in certain things she was like, well, yes, when I was a little kid, we the priests used to get after us in the confessional, and we couldn't understand anything the priest was saying from the altar. So these are all basically little lines that they've told people. You could understand anything the priest was saying, but when you start having conversations with them and they start remembering, they will start being like, oh wait, no, like actually I did know the mass. And one thing that fascinated me was when I started taking my late grandmother to the Latin mass. She would take us to the new mass when we were little, and then when I started taking her to the old mass a couple of times here and there, she would make some devotional signs or whatever that I had never seen. So it was like just going to the old mass unlocked in her certain, like, different gestures that she would make during the mass from back in the day. So you start having these conversations and you start to realize that this generation was very, very gaslit. They were very much lied to. They were told, oh, the priests used to be really, really mean and they were really bad. And you, as I said, you couldn't understand the Latin and nobody knew what was going on. And women were oppressed and so on and so forth. So once you start, and I remember I would tell my grandmother, but grandma, don't, like, none of my cousins are practicing Catholics. Like, don't you think that maybe, and all her sisters are practicing, even though sort of Catholics. So don't you think that maybe, like, that was not true? And she would be like, no, yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't never thought about it that way. So you can start with that. you talk to your Hispanic relatives that you may be unlocking some responses about different traditional practices regarding the liturgical year that they would do. Even one time, Father, I was talking to a Novus Ordo bishop about all the traditions regarding the Holy Triduum and so on and so forth. And then he told me, "Oh yeah, my grandmother said that they would break the fast after the Saturday vigil in the morning." And he was very triggered about that. Anyway, so that's one thing that you can do: speaking to all the relatives and try to see if you can get them to unlock certain memories that they have that they had just forgotten about. But once you start digging and you dig, they'll really may unveil some treasures there. And then the other one, and it's really difficult, Edgardo, because if you're like me, you have 2 children and then you have a third one on the way. It's really difficult because they are probably under the age of reason. So you're home and it's just depends. Maybe it may depend on the sex of the babies or the children, but they are under the age of reason, so they can't. Maybe you can start taking them to mass, and maybe they can stay still a little bit. But very likely, you or your wife may have to be walking in and out of mass consistently, so it's difficult. Of course, really basics. You can start out with praying the morning prayers, and then evening prayers every single day. So you probably are very busy because you are the bread maker. So you probably are out of the house a lot, more than likely. You are very busy. So, but look for those moments where put together I can talk about what I personally did is that the morning prayers for our family. I put them I printed them in little cardstock, and so that is just it's in our living room. And I have several copies in different drawers because the kids destroy everything. I have several copies in different drawers in case one of those gets destroyed. We also have another one. So I literally typed out our morning prayers and then I printed it in cardstock. So very simply, what we do is our morning prayers. I just go grab them and I read from that. That could be one. And then a really easy one, just praying the rosary. And then one thing that we've talked about a lot, Father, is mental prayer. So right now for you, it's probably very difficult to do mental prayer. You're the bread maker. You're probably leaving home early and you're going to bed late because you have a pregnant wife, and that's a lot of work. So I think in the book Mary in Our Life, sold by Angelus Press, written before the council, the author talks about the necessity of mental prayer. But of course, I this is my opinion, Father. You may have a different opinion. We may disagree on this one, but I think that that mental prayer is necessary for salvation. At least 30 minutes. If we're doing under 30 minutes of mental prayer a day, we are not going to be saved. And then also dealing with the reality that you're out there working all day, and then you come home, and then the kids expect your attention, and you can't get them to sit still. So, you can maybe start taking your eldest and then teach them about mental prayer, teach them about silent prayer. That could be a really good one. But start out with your morning offering and then night prayers. For us, the morning prayers are a little more longer. Our evening prayers that we do with the kids is just 3 Hail Marys. And then I have my own set of evening prayers that I say. And then one thing that I would seriously recommend is that you start praying the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary in the times that you are able to with the children. So, and there's a couple of good books out there, but really, I haven't seen, just because every family is different, and right now, probably both you and I are in a stage of life that doesn't last very long. So, and every family is different. Like, for example, somebody may have children with disabilities, and so that's going to be different than for people that don't have children with disabilities. Or you may have 8 children that have no disabilities, and then your 9th one. So we're in a stage of life that doesn't last. It feels like it lasts forever, but it really doesn't last very long. The the time of having little kids doesn't last very long. It's just while we're in the moment, it feels like it lasts forever. But one, I think in the book Mary, I would recommend the book Mary in Our Lives. I think that has been a very helpful book to me. One
By
of the
who?
things that it talks about. What's that, Father?
By who?
I forget the author. I'll look it up really quick before
Hold
I
on,
finish
I'll look it
talking
up. You
here.
keep talking.
Yeah, it's on Angelus Press. Mary in Our Lives. It's a great book. So I believe the author in that book talks about the issue of when you have to go work outside of the home, or even if you work at home, and then having little children that don't allow you to really have quiet time while you're with them, and then at, and then you're in maybe also in the situation where with 0 kids, if you don't have children and you're not doing mental prayer, you're not gonna make it. If you have 1 child, it's gonna look different than with 2, and then with 3. Then I've heard that after like 3, it just sort of all feels the same. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then I've heard that it all looks the same. But then you're going to start having children that are older. So I believe the author in the book Mary in Our Lives talks about, I think it's in that book, yeah. He talks about teaching our children about mental prayer, and then maybe eventually in the evenings, and this is going to also be easier once they're homeschooled, but as they maybe get past the age of reason, maybe there's a time when they go with dad to do mental prayer for 30 minutes, or maybe it can be 50, should be ideally 30 minutes, but that goes into their when they turn 10, 11, 12. And so they just grow up in a home where the children understand that they have a very loving father, and and they understand that who gives their father that loves them very much the power to do what they want, and that he's truly happy doing that. But Father, you and I have talked about a lot about the issue of happiness. If our children see that our happiness is not in God, I don't think that really anything is going to matter. If our children see that our happiness is in God, yeah, there we go. Yes, that's right. Father William Most. There we go. Yeah, perfect.
This is
Thank you for
only
the
found the
warm
ebook. I didn't find the actual hard copy.
I think you can click around the website. Maybe it's out of
Yeah,
stock.
but at least you have the name, the book, all that kind of stuff.
I recommended that book to a friend like a month ago, and he was able to get a hard copy. So
Okay.
so
I just got to look
anyway,
around.
yes. So anyway, so that's one of the things that I believe the author in that book talks about, but he does stress the importance of mental prayer. So you sort of, and again, I mean, I've had people telling me online, oh, my child was at the age of reason at 5, and maybe you can have a 6-year-old that's not yet at the age of reason. So it will all really vary. But yeah, morning prayers, evening prayers, and they can be as simple or as complicated as you really want them to do. It's
One of the
funny,
things.
Father. Yes, go on.
Go ahead.
No, I was
No,
going. I was just going to say that our nearly 6-year-old. So we do at night right before they go to bed, just 3 Hail Marys, and then before that, I just say we make the sign of the cross, and then I say oración mental, and it's just like literally like less than a minute of silence, but just so that they can get into the idea of what mental prayer is. So sometimes if we're in a rush or it's really late or we get home late or whatever, I just start with the Hail Marys, and then my 5-year-old goes like, "We didn't say a mental prayer." I was like, "Okay."
One of the things I was going to suggest, because I very rarely travel, but this past month or whatever, I had to do like a full day of travel. Like I literally flew out in the morning and flew back home in the evening, like a one day of travel. So there was a lot of travel, a lot of time on the airplane. And I know how difficult it can be when traveling in the car or in an airplane, all that kind of stuff, to actually focus on whatever. So it's very helpful actually to put in earphones to distract yourself from everything that's outside. So one of the things that's actually pretty convenient. So if you're spending a lot of time traveling in your car to from work and rush hour traffic or whatever else, is actually put on a meditation. So like one of the things I've started doing on Restless Heart Media, instead of just saying sermon for the 19th Sunday after Pentecost or whatever, giving sermons a little topic, subject, a title, so that you can more or less know what they're going to be about, what I'm preaching about, so that people can look through and find a subject matter that they're actually interested in, or as kind of goes along what they've been praying about recently, so they could put it on, listen to it. It's a 10 to 15 minute sermon, but at least that you have that to listen to for 10 to 15 minutes, and then you can sit in silence a little bit and kind of nurture that which was said. And, how can I apply this to my life, that sort of thing, so that at least when you're traveling. So mental prayer wasn't just a practice that our Lord gave, from start to finish, all that kind of stuff. It was something that was just done naturally in the hearts of those in the desert fathers, that in the medieval times, middle ages, people had somewhat gotten out of practice of doing, and so that's when religious communities like that founded by St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross said, okay, because people aren't just naturally doing this anymore. They're not naturally doing this anymore. We're gonna have set hours, set times to specifically do it. So it was a matter of discipline then, because people weren't doing it spontaneously. And so that's how we've gotten into 30 minutes. Just do it. Just set a time of 30 minutes. But, if you have an hour and 45-minute car ride because of work or whatever else, throw on a meditation. One thing that I actually admire about, Italian and Spanish, I know both languages, is that I could actually find priests actually just giving meditations and stuff. And then putting out on the internet so that you can go and listen to. I find that very few and far between in English. English is just about lectures. It's just about teaching. And so you can learn information that's great, but very, very rarely do you find something that's like a takeaway, something that like, okay, how do I form a resolution, a concrete resolution that I can fulfill in my life today? And so one of the things actually that I announced on Twitter, and I'm going to announce this Sunday at my parish, Our Lady of Good Hope here in Pinellas Park, Florida, is that the way I'm going to combat this whole, attack on Our Lady, saying that calling her co-redemptrix and mediatrix of all graces is inappropriate, is actually by more zealously promoting the first Saturday devotions. And one of the things I'm going to do is give a 15-minute meditation every first Saturday. So even on Restless Heart Media, now you're going to have a 15-minute meditation on a mystery of the Holy Rosary here on Restless Heart Media, coming out every first Saturday. So this is how I'm going to combat the crassness of the Novus Ordo, the synodal church. But also more so for you guys that, all this stuff is evergreen. All this stuff is still there. So I'll have a playlist for Saturdays. So you say, okay, I want a meditation of Our Lady. I'm in the car for another, an hour today. I may not have time just to, sit down in my bedroom by myself in complete silence with my screaming kids, out in the living room or whatever, just, to do my mental prayer. Okay, but you have this hour in the car. Okay, well, throw on some of these meditations and you can do your mental prayer in the car. I mean, it's not ideal. It's not ideal, but you also can't say it's not something. So.
Yes, and that's actually what Father Most talks about precisely in the book as well. That look, you have small children, whatever. We already talked about this. Maybe your meditation's going to have to be done in the car, or he talks about other forms of transportation that were very common, or subway or whatever that may be. But then again, these are all just for now. Like it is just right now because of the specific situation in your life that you're in, not of like, oh, look, my children are from 20 to 30. I'm just going to do my meditation in the car. So it's just for sort of a temporary, but it's not ideal, but it's something that we have to do. Another one is that really, to me, it is very, very important to live close to the mass, to the traditional mass, of course. Very, very important to live close to the mass. You live close to the mass, and so, which pretty much probably means that and I mean daily mass, which means that you probably live close to the Blessed Sacrament. And so that's St. Alphonsus has a wonderful little book on daily visits to the Blessed Sacrament. And I remember I took, we had the baby less than 2 weeks ago, so that has sort of messed with our, and then the very, very last days of pregnancy are always very hard. So anyway, that messed a little bit with our flow. But I had started taking my nearly 6-year-old to the church, and then also our church is under remodel, so that's a whole different story. But I had been taking her, so churches most days has been closed, and so whatever. But one of the odd days that the Blessed Sacrament was actually in the church on the remodeling, I took my daughter in, and it's really interesting how they get these things, Father. So she goes like, okay, so the Blessed Sacrament is here, and I was like, yes. Look, the little light is on. That means that the sacrament is there. It's like, okay, but why are there only there's like us and then like a group of 4 other people in the church. Why are there only like 5 of us here? I said, I don't know. And then she goes like, shouldn't it be full? I was like, I said, yes. And then she said, okay, then we have to come every day. But then we went the following day, and it was because of the remodeling, it's closed. And then we went the other day, and the Blessed Sacrament was not there, and so on and so forth. But living close to the Mass is going to be important.
Oof. So your daughter understood. If there's a Taylor Swift concert at the local arena, packed house, sold out. Our Lord sitting in the Blessed Sacrament in the church, empty. Oof.
And nobody would say, oh, I'm going to go live 2 hours away from my wife.
Yeah.
But we all very easily say, oh, it doesn't matter. We'll just make the drive for Mass. So I think that's definitely something to consider. Diana, Liz, thank you. You have helped me to start mental prayer again. Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. The meditations for mental prayer that I enjoy, but it's really difficult to find in English. So it's like everything that's in English, the devil doesn't really want you to have it. Let's see, really quick. I live a few blocks from a Novus Ordo parish, and they have 24/7 adoration. Is it permissible to go to Novus Ordo? I don't know if it's permissible. I consider Novus like just Novus Ordo as if it's Lutheran. So I wouldn't. But who am I to judge?
I mean, if the sacrament is valid, you're there for the sacrament, right? Of course, the chapels could be cringe. It just depends on the chapel, whether it's considered prayer or not. Obviously, here's this. We have adoration not because the golden doors on the tabernacle somehow can restrain the presence of God. Okay, the doors, the brick walls, the concrete walls, whatever you want to call them, they have no power to contain the presence of God. In which case, the room, whatever your room is you're sitting in, Almighty God is just as present there as he is in the sanctuary at your church, your traditional church, just as present. The difference is our presence to him. The difference isn't his presence to us, it's our presence to him. This is why the devotion of adoration came about, was so that we could become more present to him, rather, so that when he's there in the monstrance, we see him, we have all the incense, we have the candles on the altar, everything else, we become more present to him, and we can go from this. And then we can go from this. And so, is there an actual need to go to specifically to adoration? Of course not. Of course not. This is a practice that developed again later in the church. Nevertheless, is it helpful? I mean, absolutely. Absolutely, it's helpful. So, I mean, if you're one of those that, doubts 100% the validity of the Novus Ordo sacraments, I can understand why you would want to avoid going or not see the need to go. But, I mean, if it's our Lord, it's our Lord. So.
Right before we go here, I bought the book by Peter Alcantara that Alberto had mentioned. And look, Father, at the end of the day, that's going to be, hopefully it keeps so, but that's going to be one of the main differences between the grifters. We're directing people towards spiritual works and works of the saints and so on and so forth.
Meanwhile, we're not trying to sell our own books. We're not trying to sell our own books.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the grifters are like, look, buy my book on why the Christ in the church is this or that way. So anyway, thank you all so much, Father. Anything else before we go for tonight? We will be back. We're back on Tuesday, continuing on the restoration of Christian culture, and we're back next Friday, God willing, back on the live stream to take the questions. Anything else before we go, Father? Procedamus.
Procedamus.com. Listen, guys, we have to build. We have to get away from this anger. Get away from this anger. Get away to just saying in your own personal life, oh, I side with this position, I side with that position. We need to build. We need to provide for the future of the church. The Novus Ordo Church is going to collapse. Not going to provide any buildings, any resources for us to continue the church kind of faith. We have to do it ourselves. We have to. So we have to keep going. We have to put our money where our faith is. And it's the traditional groups that prove themselves to hold to the traditional Catholic faith, not those who abide by the 1983 code or whatever else that just decides that confirmation is randomly just invalid or whatever else. We have to support those groups that are holding the faith. So procedamus.com. Consider going. I'll be there. Alberto will be there. Bishop Miko will be there. It's going to be a great. Father Calvin Robinson, Bug Hall, Guys, we're all going to be there. Come talk to us. Meet us face to face. Let's have a good time. Let's have a good time and support a traditional Catholic cause. It's built for the future.
We've talked through the stream about, this Novus Ordo and that thread and so on and so forth. It's not really only a conflict, Father, that like a conflict of their conscience that only people online are having. I know people in real life that are having these conflicts, and the Procedamus Gala is a way to support a cause that is for Christ the King. Because at the end of the day, Father, the truth is that our children don't care about whatever's going on in Rome. That's really not going to make a difference at all. The difference that is going to be made is the faith, prayer, and us being able to teach them to discern what God wants in their lives. And that's really what the battle is for our sanctification. We can play football at Procedamus.
No, I'm at the age where I'm goalie. I'm at the age where I'm goalie.
Father, you were a goalie. Where we can be on opposite teams. We could have a liturgical soccer game at the Novus Ordo Parish. I bet they would love that.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So really, that's what matters, Father. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in the chat and making this enjoyable. We'll see you all next week.
All right. God bless. Why Procedamus? I remember the day after my ordination, the morning of my first Mass, vesting in the sacristy, putting on the amice, putting on the alb, the cincture, the maniple, the stole, the vestments. I remember the 10 years that I had been preparing for this moment. Aside from the emotions and the nerves, I was aware of what offering the holy sacrifice of the Mass means for myself and for all the faithful. But additionally, given the context of the current persecution of the traditional Catholic faith in the world and in the Church, I grabbed my chalice, I grabbed my biretta, looked at the crucifix, bowed, and said, Procedamus in pacem, to which the altar servers replied, In nomine Christi, Amen. I put on my biretta, and we processed out to the altar to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, the Mass of the ages. Ascending the steps of the altar, I felt only gratitude to our Lord for having allowed me to be an instrument in preserving that which is true, good, and beautiful for future generations, for the ages to come. As long as I'm physically able, this Mass will continue to be offered. This spirit of determination, this spirit of perseverance, is that to which I would love to invite all of you to share. The first annual Procedamus Gala is organized to support the mission of the Oblates of St. Augustine and the Old Roman Catholic See of Caer-Glow, to preserve the traditional Latin Mass and the traditional Catholic faith for future generations. Procedamus.